It was a night when the wind seemed to cut right through the thickest coats, the kind of winter evening that made even the strongest people hurry home as fast as they could. Snowflakes fell gently at first, swirling in the light of street lamps, and then they began to fall faster, heavier, covering the sidewalks, cars, and streets in a soft but chilling blanket of white. People walked quickly, heads down, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep into pockets, trying to escape the icy air. The cold was sharp and unrelenting, and the city seemed quieter than usual, as though the snow had muffled all the usual noise and made the world feel still, almost frozen in time. In the middle of this frozen city, a young girl wandered alone, her small coat far too thin for the harsh weather, her gloves were missing, and her shoes were soaked through, letting the cold seep into her tiny feet. Each step she took left a small, wet footprint in the snow, but she didn't notice because her mind was racing. She was scared and confused, unsure how she had ended up separated from her family. The streets that seemed familiar during the day now looked vast and frightening. Shadows of streetlights stretching long and dark across the snow. The girl's breath came in short, visible puffs, each one disappearing almost instantly into the frigid air, and her shivering grew harder to control. People passed by her quickly, wrapped in scarves and coats, focused on their own errands or trying to reach home before the snow made the roads slippery and dangerous. No one seemed to notice the small girl struggling in the cold. Her eyes were wide, scanning each passing face for someone familiar, but there was no one. She tugged at her coat and tried to hug herself for warmth, but it did little good. The cold seemed to get deeper with every minute, making her small body ache and her fingers and toes numb. It wasn't just the cold that scared her, it was the feeling of being completely alone, a tiny person in a big, silent, snowy city. Meanwhile, a black woman was driving home after a long day, her car heater warm and comforting as she navigated the quiet streets. Her eyes caught a small figure moving slowly across the sidewalk, and something in her heart immediately tightened. She slowed the car and looked more closely, noticing the girl's small frame shaking violently in the snow. Her coat looked thin, and the little girl's face was pale from the cold. There was no hesitation in the woman's mind. She knew she had to help. She quickly parked the car on the side of the street, wrapping herself in her own scarf before stepping out into the biting wind. The snow crunched under her boots as she approached the girl, who froze for a moment, unsure whether this stranger was a threat or a friend. The woman crouched down to the girl's level and spoke softly, her voice warm and calm. "Hey there, are you okay? It's really cold out here, let's get you somewhere warm." The girl's teeth chattered as she nodded, and tears began to form in her eyes, not just from the cold but from relief that someone had finally noticed her. The woman gently took the girl's hand, holding it firmly to share her own warmth, and led her to the car, keeping her coat wrapped around both of them. The girl leaned into the warmth, feeling it seep into her cold body, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. The wind howled around them, but inside the little bubble of care and concern, the storm seemed to matter a little less. Even as the snow continued to fall heavily, the girl's fear slowly began to melt away, replaced by curiosity and cautious hope. She looked up at the woman, who smiled reassuringly and brushed snow from the girl's coat. "Don't worry, we're going to get you warm and safe," she said. The girl tried to speak, but her words were little more than a shiver, so the woman simply nodded, understanding perfectly, guiding her to the car door. As they reached the car, the woman opened the door and helped the girl inside, quickly starting the engine and letting the heat fill the small space. The girl's eyes widened at the warmth, pressing her hands to the heater and letting her shivering body relax little by little. She watched as the snow fell outside the window, no longer frightening but strangely beautiful, each flake sparkling in the streetlights, reflecting the safety she now felt. The city outside was still cold, dark, and unforgiving, but inside that car, there was comfort, care, and a sense of hope. The young girl, once alone and lost, now had someone who saw her, someone who cared, and that small act of noticing her, of stopping to help, was already changing the course of her night. It was just the beginning, but in those first moments, the cold night no longer seemed quite so terrible, because in the middle of the harsh snowstorm, someone had reached out, and the girl had finally found warmth, human kindness, and the first spark of hope that something incredible could happen. The woman could feel her heart pounding as she knelt beside the little girl, who was trembling uncontrollably. Her small body shook with every gust of wind, and her lips were already turning blue from the cold. The woman gently placed her hands over the girl's, rubbing them to share warmth. "It's okay, sweetie, I'm here now. she whispered softly, her voice calm and steady, hoping to chase away the fear that lingered in the girl's eyes. For a moment, the girl hesitated, unsure whether this stranger could be trusted, but the warmth radiating from the woman's hands, along with her kind expression, gave her the courage to nod, just slightly. She let the woman take her hand, allowing herself to be guided to the car. Each step was difficult, the icy snow crunching under their feet, but the woman held her hand firmly, never letting go. Every movement was careful and deliberate, ensuring the girl felt safe and secure. As they approached the parked car, the woman kept talking in a gentle, reassuring tone, "We're going to get you warm. You don't have to be scared anymore." The words seemed to wrap around the girl like a blanket, soft and comforting. She glanced up at the woman, her wide eyes meeting the adults, searching for a promise in that smile, and in that moment, she sensed she could trust her completely. Once inside the car, the woman immediately helped the girl remove her wet coat, carefully placing it on the seat beside her. The car's heater began to fill the space with warmth, slowly chasing away the biting cold that had gripped the little girl's body. She pressed her hands to the vent, trying to absorb as much heat as possible, and leaned against the seat, exhausted from hours of wandering and shivering. The woman handed her a small scarf from her bag, wrapping it around her neck. "This will help you stay warm while we figure everything out," she said. The little girl's eyes began to fill with tears, not just from the cold, but from relief and gratitude. She whispered a quiet thank you, her voice barely audible, and the woman smiled. "You don't need to thank me, we're going to make sure you're safe." She reached for the girl's hands again, holding them gently, feeling the tiny pulse of fear slowly being replaced by comfort. As the car hummed quietly, the woman kept glancing at the girl, noticing every shiver, every twitch of discomfort. She adjusted the temperature, made sure the heater was reaching her hands and feet, and even offered her a small bottle of water she had in her bag. "You need to drink a little, okay? It will help you feel better," she said, her tone patient and warm. The girl nodded, slowly sipping, her body relaxing little by little as the warmth began to spread through her. The woman's mind raced, thinking about what to do next. She needed to find the girl's family, but she also wanted to make sure the girl felt safe while they waited. She asked softly, "Do you know where your parents are? Can you tell me anything about them?" The girl shook her head, tears spilling over. I don't know. I got lost," she murmured, her small voice breaking. The woman reached over and gently stroked her hair. "It's okay, sweetie, we'll find them, I promise. You're not alone anymore." The little girl leaned slightly against the woman's shoulder, the exhaustion and fear catching up to her, but the warmth and care around her gave her the courage to relax. For the first time in hours, she felt protected, like someone was truly looking out for her. The snowstorm outside continued, but inside the car, it felt like a small bubble of safety, a temporary world where kindness had the power to melt fear and cold alike. The woman glanced at the rearview mirror, thinking about the next steps. She would call the authorities, check the local shelters, and make sure the girl was safely returned home. But in this moment, all that mattered was the immediate rescue, the act of taking a frightened child from the dangerous cold into a place of warmth and security. Every little gesture mattered, holding hands, speaking softly, offering a scarf, making her drink water, reassuring her constantly. Each act built trust, each act built hope, and each act showed the little girl that she wasn't alone anymore. By the time the woman started the car and pulled back onto the snowy streets, the girl had stopped shivering as violently, her small body slowly relaxing into the warmth. Her eyes, still wide with awe, followed the woman, a mix of gratitude and curiosity shining through. She didn't fully understand why this stranger had helped her, but she felt a deep, instinctive sense that she was safe, she had been rescued, and that simple truth brought a glimmer of hope to her frozen heart. Once the little girl was safely inside the car, the woman felt a sense of relief wash over her, but she knew the night wasn't over yet. The girl's tiny body still shook slightly, and her eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, followed every movement the woman made. There was an unspoken understanding between them. This wasn't just about escaping the cold, it was about creating a space where the girl could feel truly safe, a place where the harshness of the winter night couldn't reach her. The woman drove carefully through the snowy streets, keeping the heater on full and occasionally glancing at the girl, who had begun to press her hands against it, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. "Almost there," the woman said softly, trying to reassure her without sounding rushed. Her heart ached seeing how small and vulnerable the girl was, yet there was a spark of courage in her eyes, a flicker of trust that had grown since the moment the woman had taken her hand. When they arrived at the woman's home, she quickly opened the front door, stepping inside first to clear the snow from the entryway. "Come on in, sweetie," she said, holding her hand out. "You're safe now." The girl hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the snowy street, the fear of the unknown still lingering, but the warmth radiating from the doorway and the kind look on the woman's face encouraged her to step inside. The moment they entered, the difference was immediate. The cold, harsh wind and the sound of snow crunching underfoot were replaced by warmth, soft lights, and a sense of calm. The woman guided the girl to the living room, where she had already laid out a thick blanket on the sofa, inviting her to sit down and get comfortable, she said, handing her a cup of warm tea, careful that it wasn't too hot for her little hands. The girl wrapped herself in the blanket, the warmth spreading through her body like a gentle hug. She took small sips of the tea, letting it soothe the cold from her throat and chest. Her eyes slowly began to relax, the tension in her small frame softening with every passing minute. The woman sat beside her, talking quietly about simple things, stories of her own childhood, and little jokes that made the girl smile just a tiny bit. It was a small miracle, watching her shift from fear and trembling to curiosity and comfort. While the girl began to settle, the woman took off her wet coat, hung it carefully to dry, and put a pair of warm slippers by the sofa. She wanted every detail to matter, every little act to tell the girl that she was no longer alone, that someone genuinely cared. The snowstorm outside still raged on, but inside, there was a different world, a sanctuary built from compassion, care, and simple acts of thoughtfulness. The woman noticed the girl's shivering had slowed almost completely, though her lips were still pale. She gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing great. You're safe now, and we'll make sure you get home," she said. Her words were steady, comforting, and filled with a promise. The girl nodded slightly, her eyes bright with the faintest glimmer of hope, a hope that had been buried beneath fear and cold just hours ago. The woman looked around, thinking about what else she could do to make the girl feel more at home. She fetched a small stuffed toy she kept for emergencies and handed it to the girl, who hugged it tightly. "This is for you," the woman said, smiling. "It can stay with you until you're back with your family." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not just from fear, they were tears of comfort, gratitude, and a sense of being cared for. As the girl sipped her tea and held the toy close, she began to tell the woman tiny bits about herself, about where she had been, and how she had gotten lost. Each word was a little step toward healing the fright of the night. The woman listened patiently, never interrupting, nodding softly, and offering quiet words of encouragement. She knew that this moment, the creation of safety and trust, was more important than anything else. It was about giving the girl space to feel human again, to feel warmth in a night that had been bitterly cold. By the time the tea was finished, the little girl was relaxed enough to curl up under the blanket, her shivering gone, replaced by a sleepy comfort that came from being truly safe. The woman watched her, her heart full, knowing that this simple act of providing shelter, warmth, and understanding had made all the difference. Outside, the snowstorm continued to howl, but inside, there was peace, care, and a growing bond between a rescuer and the rescued. In that safe haven, the girl felt something she hadn't felt all night. She was not alone, she was seen, and she was cared for. The woman's home, a simple place of warmth and compassion, had become a small world where fear and cold could no longer touch her, and in that world, something extraordinary had begun, something that would continue to unfold as the night went on. As the little girl settled under the warm blanket, her tiny body finally stilling, the woman sat across from her on the sofa, watching her carefully. She didn't rush, knowing that trust could not be forced. Every small movement, every shiver or glance, told her more about the fear the girl had endured. She wanted to create a connection, a bond that would make the child feel safe enough to open up, to speak, and to let go of the panic that had haunted her for hours. The girl's eyes darted around the room, lingering on the walls, the furniture, the small glowing lamp on the table. Everything was foreign, but it was warm, and the quiet safety of the room seemed to whisper to her that she was no longer alone. The woman spoke softly, not asking too much at once. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked gently, and the girl hesitated before whispering, "Lila." Her voice was tiny, trembling, and filled with vulnerability, but the woman smiled warmly. "Lila. That's a beautiful name," she said, keeping her tone calm and encouraging. For a long moment, Lila stayed silent, pressing the blanket closer around her, but the woman didn't push. She continued to talk quietly about everyday things, about snow, warm blankets, tea, and small stories of her own childhood. She described her own first experiences of snow, the joy and the laughter it brought, and even the times she had fallen and gotten cold, hoping the familiar stories might give Lila a sense of comfort and connection. Slowly, Lila's hand stopped trembling as she listened, and her eyes softened. The warmth of the room, combined with the warmth of someone who clearly cared, began to chip away at the walls she had built around herself. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook and a crayon, handing it to Lila. "Here, you can draw anything you want while we wait," she said, her voice gentle, inviting creativity as a way to relax. The girl's small fingers gripped the crayon tentatively, but soon she was sketching little shapes, a small sign that she was beginning to feel safe. As Lila drew, she began to speak in small, hesitant bursts, telling the woman bits about her family, where she had been before she got lost, and how scared she had been wandering alone in the snow. The woman listened without interrupting, nodding, and occasionally offering reassuring words. "It's okay, Lila, you're safe here. You're not alone anymore," she repeated, and each time Lila heard it, a little more of the tension in her body seemed to melt away. The woman realized that this connection, the simple act of listening, of acknowledging the girl's fear, and responding with empathy, was as important as getting her out of the cold. It wasn't enough to rescue her physically, she needed emotional safety too, a sense that someone truly cared and understood, and in these quiet moments, that bond began to form. Lila looked up at her rescuer for the first time without fear clouding her eyes. She studied her face, trying to read the expressions, and slowly, a tiny smile appeared, a smile so small, yet so significant, that it warmed the woman's heart. It was a sign that the little girl was beginning to trust her, beginning to believe that not everyone in the world was cruel or careless. The woman continued to talk softly, asking Lila simple questions about her favorite colors, her favorite games, and what she liked to eat. Each answer, each small detail, created a bridge between them, a connection that allowed Lila to step out of the shadow of fear that had followed her through the snowy streets. The woman shared little pieces of herself too, her own love for reading, warm cocoa, and winter walks, making the conversation feel natural and safe. After some time, Lila reached over and took the woman's hand, a small but powerful gesture of trust. She didn't speak, but the act itself said everything. The child was no longer just surviving, she was beginning to connect, to hope, to feel a bond that went beyond simple safety. It was in that moment the woman knew that the rescue was only the beginning, that human connection, empathy, and attention could heal even the deepest fears. Outside, the snowstorm continued, relentless and cold, but inside that living room, a quiet miracle had begun. 2 lives, one small, frightened, and alone, the other strong, compassionate, and willing, were now linked, a connection formed not by obligation, but by genuine care, and it was this connection that would guide the next steps of the night, ensuring that the little girl would not just survive, but feel safe, valued, and seen for the first time in hours. As Lila began to relax, sipping her warm tea and clutching the small stuffed toy, the woman knew that their next step was crucial. She couldn't simply let the night continue without trying to reunite Lila with her family. The girl had been through so much already, wandering alone in the snow, and while the warmth of the room and the comfort of a stranger's care had helped, she still needed to be returned to the people who loved her most. The woman reached for her phone, making sure to keep her movements calm and gentle so as not to startle Lila. She explained softly, "Lila, I'm going to call someone who can help us find your family, okay?" "It's going to be fine," the girl nodded quietly, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of fear, uncertainty, and hope. It was the first time she had been asked if she was okay in hours, and that small gesture of consideration made her feel respected and cared for. The woman dialed the local authorities and explained the situation, describing Lila as best as she could, the girl's age, her clothing, and the fact that she had been found alone in the snow. She spoke calmly, clearly, emphasizing that the girl was safe now and that time was of the essence in finding her parents. As she waited for confirmation, she stayed close to Lila, never letting go of her hand, providing a constant anchor in the uncertain moments. While the woman spoke on the phone, Lila's curiosity began to peek through, and she asked in a quiet, tentative voice, "Do you think they're worried about me?" The woman smiled softly, squeezing her hand reassuringly. Yes, Lila. I'm sure your parents are very worried, but don't worry, we're going to make sure they find you, you're safe now, and we'll help you get back to them. The girl nodded again, her fingers tightening around the stuffed toy, finding comfort in both the warmth of the room and the woman's steady presence. Once the call ended, the woman had instructions from the authorities, who assured her that a team would come to verify Lila's safety and help locate her parents quickly, but she also knew she needed to keep the girl occupied, calm, and feeling safe while waiting. She continued their conversation, asking about Lila's favorite foods, toys, and games, sharing little stories about her own childhood to make the girl laugh. Even a small giggle from Lila was enough to let the woman know that the fear was slowly melting away, replaced by hope. The snow continued to fall outside, heavier now, blanketing the streets and turning the world into a quiet, white expanse, but inside, the warmth of the room and the connection between the woman and Lila created a sanctuary, a protective bubble from the storm. Every small gesture mattered, offering sips of tea, adjusting the blanket, handing her crayons to draw, and talking softly in a calm voice. Each one helped the girl feel that she was not alone, that someone genuinely cared, and that help was on the way. After some time, the woman heard a knock at the door, and her heart skipped a beat. Could it be the authorities? Could it be Lila's family? She smiled reassuringly at Lila. Someone's here to help us, she said softly, guiding the girl to sit a little straighter. Her presence beside the child was steadying, giving Lila the courage to face the unknown. The door opened, and a kind-faced officer stepped inside, confirming the woman's story and asking gentle questions of the girl. The officer's calm and friendly demeanor added another layer of reassurance, and Lila clung to the woman's hand for courage. The process was slow but careful, designed to make the girl feel safe and supported, not rushed or frightened. Finally, the officer assured the woman that they were contacting the child's parents immediately, and that Lila would be reunited with them soon. The woman felt a wave of relief, but she stayed with Lila, holding her hand, speaking softly to keep the child calm. Each word, each reassuring gesture, helped Lila trust that this stranger who had rescued her was now guiding her safely back to her family. As they waited together, Lila's tiny hands gripping the stuffed toy and the woman's hand, it became clear that the act of rescue was not just about removing her from the cold, it was about building trust, creating a sense of hope, and showing a frightened child that kindness and human connection could make even the darkest, coldest night feel safe. It was a quiet reminder that help could come in the form of empathy, courage, and unwavering care. The woman had just finished explaining to Lila that help was on the way when a sudden knock echoed through the quiet, snow-filled night. The sound startled both of them, though not in fear, but in anticipation. Lila clutched the stuffed toy tightly, her small hands trembling slightly, and the woman's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on keeping the girl safe and calm that she hadn't even considered what, or who, might be at the door. The woman moved slowly, carefully, toward the door, still keeping one hand on Lila's shoulder. It's okay, Lila, she whispered, let's see who it is. She opened the door just a crack, peering out, expecting perhaps another officer or a neighbor, but what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Her eyes widened as a familiar voice called out, Lila. Lila, is that you? Standing there, in the cold, snow swirling around them like a quiet whirlwind, were the little girl's parents, their faces pale with worry, cheeks red from the bitter winter wind, eyes wide and searching, scanning every corner until they saw the child they had feared lost. The woman's heart swelled with relief, but she didn't move until she was sure the moment was safe, allowing Lila to process the sight of her family. The girl's eyes lit up instantly, tears welling as she recognized them. Her lips trembled, and a gasp escaped her small mouth. She bolted forward before the woman could react, throwing herself into her mother's arms. The mother hugged her tightly, as if she could shield her from every worry, every cold night, and every danger she had faced. The father followed quickly, enveloping both of them in his arms, murmuring words of relief and love that seemed to fill the entire room. The woman stood back, watching quietly, her heart full, feeling an overwhelming sense of joy and fulfillment. This was the moment she had hoped for. The child she had rescued, the girl who had wandered lost and scared in the freezing snow, was finally safe and surrounded by love. The parents turned toward the woman, their faces glowing with gratitude, eyes shimmering with tears. Thank you, the mother said, her voice cracking with emotion. Thank you for saving her. for keeping her safe. We didn't know what we would do, the father nodded, holding the mother's hand, and then reaching out to squeeze the woman's shoulder. We can never repay you, but please know how much this means. The woman smiled warmly, shaking her head gently. No need to repay me, she said, her voice soft but firm. I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't leave her out there. Lila peeked around her mother's shoulder at the woman who had rescued her, and for the first time, she smiled freely, a smile full of wonder and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered softly, her voice small but sincere. The woman knelt down, looking Lila in the eyes. You're welcome, sweetheart. Remember, kindness is everywhere. People are here to help, she said, feeling the warmth of the moment settle in her chest. The snowstorm outside continued, but inside the home, the atmosphere was electric with relief, joy, and a deep sense of human connection. The little girl's family invited the woman in, offering her tea and blankets, but she politely declined, insisting her duty was done. Yet, she lingered a moment longer, enjoying the sight of the reunion, knowing that her actions had created this extraordinary moment, something that would be remembered by all three of them forever. As they talked, the parents shared more about Lila, stories of her laughter, her favorite games, the tiny habits that made her unique, and Lila, now safe and warm in her parents' arms, recounted bits of her night, carefully avoiding the parts that had frightened her most. She looked at the woman with a mixture of awe and admiration, realizing that the stranger had been her hero, her protector in a time when she needed one most. The woman quietly stepped back, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The rescue had been more than just removing a child from the cold, it had created bonds, instilled hope, and reminded everyone present that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they acted with courage and compassion. In that small living room, with snow falling silently outside, the unexpected surprise had turned into a perfect ending for a night that began with fear and uncertainty, transforming it into a story of bravery, kindness, and the power of human connection. The little girl, now safely back in her mother's arms, felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in hours. Her body, once cold and trembling, was finally still, and the terror of wandering alone through snow-filled streets had begun to melt away. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from fear this time, but from relief and the overwhelming joy of being back with the people who loved her most. Her father held both of them tightly, rocking gently, murmuring comforting words, and promising her that she would never be alone in such a dangerous night again. The woman who had rescued her stood nearby, watching quietly, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet joy. This moment, so raw, so filled with human emotion, was the reason she had acted without hesitation. The sight of a child, once lost and frightened, now embraced by her family, filled her with a sense of fulfillment that words could barely capture. The small living room seemed to hum with emotion, every smile, every tear, and every hug radiating warmth that no heater could create. Lila clung tightly to her mother, her small hands clutching the fabric of her coat as if she could never let go. Her tiny voice, still trembling, managed to whisper, "I was so scared." The mother kissed her forehead, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. "I know, sweetie, I know. But you're safe now. You're home," she said softly, her voice steady and full of reassurance. The father nodded, wrapping an arm around both of them. "And we'll never let anything happen to you again," he added, his eyes shining with love and a hint of lingering worry. The woman approached slowly, kneeling down to be at Lila's eye level. "Hi, sweetheart," she said gently, her tone calm and kind. "You were so brave tonight. You did everything right, and now you're safe." Lila looked up at her, her wide eyes meeting the woman's, filled with awe, gratitude, and the beginnings of understanding that this stranger had been her guardian angel. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but it carried the weight of every fear she had felt earlier. The parents turned to the woman, their faces glowing with emotion. "We can never thank you enough," the mother said, her voice cracking. "You saved her. You gave her life back to us tonight." The father nodded in agreement, taking her hands in theirs briefly. "You didn't just rescue her from the snow. You rescued her from fear, from loneliness. You were her protector," he said, his words carrying a deep sincerity that touched the woman's heart. Lila reached out, her small hand brushing the woman's, a simple gesture filled with meaning. She didn't need to speak. The connection, the gratitude, and the trust were clear in the touch. The woman smiled softly, squeezing her hand gently. "You're welcome, Lila. Remember, courage isn't about never being scared. It's about finding someone to trust when you are, she said. Her words were simple, yet powerful, and Lila seemed to absorb them, the spark of trust and hope shining in her young eyes. The parents began sharing stories with the woman, recounting how worried they had been, the frantic search, the calls they made, and the endless fear that had gripped them when they realized she was missing. Every word painted a vivid picture of a family's love, and the woman felt honored to have played a role in bringing them back together. She listened quietly, nodding and occasionally sharing small details of the night, careful to focus on Lila's bravery and the strength she had shown. Lila, now calmer, began to smile intermittently, snuggling closer to her mother, yet still stealing glances at the woman, her rescuer, as if to ensure that the bond they had formed would not be forgotten. The warmth of the reunion, the tears, the laughter, and even the quiet moments of reflection all merged into a profound experience, one that highlighted the extraordinary power of human connection and compassion. As the night wore on, the woman realized that this was more than just a rescue. It was a lesson in empathy, courage, and the ripple effects of kindness. Her single act of bravery had restored hope to a frightened child and reunited a family, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Lila's parents offered their heartfelt thanks again, and the little girl, now safe, rested against her mother's chest, a sense of peace settling over her for the first time since the snow had begun to fall. In that small living room, surrounded by warmth, love, and gratitude, the emotional reunion was complete. The storm outside still raged, but inside, the world felt calm, safe, and full of promise. The night that had begun with fear, isolation, and cold had transformed into a story of bravery, compassion, and the incredible human capacity to protect, care, and connect. And in that moment, everyone present knew that the smallest acts of kindness could create the most extraordinary results. The snow had finally begun to slow outside, the storm's fury retreating into a quiet, glistening white world, but inside the small living room, the warmth lingered, not just from the heater or blankets, but from the extraordinary bond that had formed between a child, her family, and a stranger who had changed their lives forever. The woman sat quietly, watching Lila laugh softly with her mother, the little girl's earlier fear now replaced with joy, relief, and a spark of hope that had been missing for hours. It was a moment that captured the very essence of human kindness. A single act of courage, the decision to reach out and help someone in need, had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. Lila's parents could see the depth of that impact, the way their child, once shivering and alone, had been nurtured back to safety and confidence. Their gratitude was immense, but they also understood something deeper. The woman had given them more than just their child back. She had reminded them of the power of selflessness in a world that often felt harsh and cold. Lila, now wrapped in her mother's arms, looked up at the woman, her eyes wide and shining. "I'll never forget you," she whispered, her small voice full of emotion. The woman smiled softly. "I won't forget you either," she replied, feeling the weight of the connection they had formed. It was a quiet promise, a shared understanding that even brief moments of care could leave an everlasting impression on someone's life. As the family began to settle, the woman stood to leave, but the parents insisted she stay a few more minutes, offering hot tea and warm blankets, their gratitude overflowing. Their voices were gentle but insistent. "You saved more than our daughter tonight. You reminded us all what it means to care for one another," the mother said, her eyes glistening with tears. The father nodded, adding, "The world needs more people like you." And in that simple statement, the woman felt a warmth deeper than anything the heater could provide. Before stepping out into the quiet, snow-dusted streets, the woman knelt down one last time, looking directly at Lila. "Remember, courage is not about being unafraid," she said softly. "It's about trusting that someone will be there to help when you need it, and kindness is the most powerful thing you can share. Always remember that." Lila nodded, her small hands clutching the stuffed toy tightly, a symbol of safety, trust, and the extraordinary night she had survived. The woman opened the door, stepping out into the calm, crisp air, the snow sparkling like tiny diamonds under the streetlights. She paused for a moment, looking back at the warm glow coming from the house, feeling a quiet pride and fulfillment. In the distance, she could hear laughter and gentle chatter, the sounds of a family reunited, hearts mended, and trust restored. It was a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things simply by choosing to act with compassion, courage, and empathy. The story of that night would not end with just the family, however. The little girl's bravery and the woman's heroism quickly became a story that inspired others, spreading through the community as a quiet legend of hope, compassion, and the human spirit. People would hear of how a stranger had rescued a child from the bitter cold, how she had nurtured her back to safety, and how the night ended with tears, laughter, and the simple truth that kindness matters, even in small acts. The woman walked home slowly, each step leaving a footprint in the fresh snow, but she felt lighter, knowing she had made a real difference, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do, because sometimes, the simplest choices, reaching out a hand, speaking softly, holding someone when they are afraid, can create ripples that change lives, save hearts, and restore faith in humanity. Back in the house, Lila drifted off to sleep, safe, warm, and loved, her parents sitting close, sharing quiet words of relief and gratitude, their hearts full of appreciation, but also of hope, knowing that the world still held heroes, ordinary people who could make the extraordinary possible. That night, the bond formed between a stranger, a child, and a family became more than just a story. It became a lasting inspiration, a shining reminder that one act of courage and kindness can echo far beyond a single night, touching hearts, inspiring change, and proving that humanity's greatest power lies in compassion, care, and connection.